I wanted to start off first with, let's go over the books and where are you going to find these patterns. And I wanted to kind of give you an assortment of my collection and the different places that I've gone to. So as we're going through the books, I will give you a sense of like what types of books are there available, and we'll look really briefly through some of these, but sort of step one, where you can find books like these. Etsy is one great source. If you don't live in a major city, there is a Japanese bookstore called Kinokuna that is amazing and has a selection of all kinds of books, not only knitting, crochet, sewing. There is just an assortment beyond what you would normally have access to perhaps in the Etsy world, but Etsy has quite a few resources, which I'll include in the description. But I may just do a separate video where I'm giving you all the apps that I've mentioned in all these videos, plus all the designers that I've mentioned, just so that you can see their socials and links, so that you have it as almost like a resource repository with the ability to kind of just do quick walkthroughs. And that's really important because the critical piece is to have all the toolkits. But the first thing is you have to start off is with the patterns. So, you know, when you go to the stores, if you get a chance to go, New York, it's near Bryant Park, you know, go to that section. Their section is in the bottom floor. You know, open the book up. You know, you're always going to get what types of stitch options are you going to have, or patterns you're going to have in the actual book itself. There always will be front photography. And then, you know, if you see something you like, you'll go over, and we'll talk about this in the next section of this video. But you're going to have pattern name, the information, needles, gauge, yarn, construction instructions, schematics, which we'll go over at a high level. And then you're also going to have the chart. Everything is pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what that looks like. So this is one book option here. This is another beautiful one. Again, you can see some of the designs are, you know, they're, you know, can be great for a first project. Again, you're looking at really some just beautiful pieces here. And I don't want to say, but this is knitting and crochet, which I think is phenomenal. So you can also have the option to do a lot of lace work here. So this is, you know, a great resource. So, and you may buy crochet only books, but maybe some of these patterns will have your option. So again, it follows the same premise, title, your hook sizes, and your schematics. So I didn't want to do this without really talking about the crochet element, because the crochet is just so profoundly beautiful in these designs that I really wanted you to have a visual on that as well, since most people do both. Here's the knitting symbol book that I mentioned before. I also mentioned some of the apps that we'll talk about later, but that's also something that you should and be able to pick up. But you can see all types of designs and all types of also fibers. So here's something for people that love, you know, a great mohair, and a mohair maybe with another mix. And again, don't be afraid to take a look at what the design types are, and you'll find that often what you're going to see is a combination of possible knitting and crochet options in each book, which I think is fabulous. You'll see here mittens. This is so interesting, and I think this would be a great project just to kind of show you how to follow along on something. I've actually written the publisher to see if I can get permission for to share one of these patterns with everyone to do a knit along. We'll see if I hear back. But again, look how fun these are and just really unique and interesting. So it's just to give you a gauge as to the fact that there's so many options to do. So if you're a sweater gal and you love cardigans, again, this is going to give you a theme that you're really going to love. If you're all about socks, here you are. You'll have, you know, I again encourage you to go in and be able to just look at things and have a sense of what the designs are going to look like. Another thing about these books is it's going to give you the yarn that's going to be utilized. So I will talk about, and hopefully you're seeing this on the screen, but let's talk a little bit about how I tackle this. I will take my phone, go Google Translate, and go over the page and get this translated into English, take a picture of it, and also keep a copy of the text. But what's really wonderful is that each book, instead of having to then go buy a stitch or how-to book, it's giving you all the construction techniques inside the book, which I think is fantastic. Sometimes if you just get the pattern alone without the book, it can be a little bit challenging because you just don't have everything accessible to you. But here, you're going to get basic lessons in doing everything that you need to do for the patterns that are available in this book. And that, I think, is so interesting and also fun, and you feel you have all the components that you're going to want to have. This is another wonderful book that I picked up. I actually got this one at the Quincunia. And again, there's all different types of techniques. So it's not just for your, you know, starting knitter, and it's not all just boxy sweaters. There's just such a variety. And I just think the covers are just so fun that I just really wanted to share what's available, because there's just such a variety. And I think we'll talk about the fact that there's going to be yarn that is available to you. But what I also want to impart is that there's also going to be, you know, you can use the yarn that's in your stash. You probably are going to see the fibers and see the grams and weights and sizes, and you're going to be able to utilize, you know, weight calculators that are available online and substitute and do. I think these are great ways to do yarn, do some yarn busting or stash busting. Pardon me. And be able to kind of take what's in your archives and pull that out and do some really beautiful things. I mean, look at this flap hat. I mean, it's glorious. I also wanted to talk about the options here. So when I talk about the bookstore, there's also magazines. So if your books are like, I'm not really into books, I wanted magazines. Of course, there's an assortment of magazines. I'm going to probably mispronounce this, so I apologize to all the native Japanese speakers that are watching this, but this is Ketodama. I wanted to also feature this because we have some crocheters that are watching, and I wanted to share this. I think this, you can find a lot of these archival. I collect these because I just think they're so beautiful. They have a lot of the archival editions available on Etsy, available on eBay. I have a few extra copies myself, so feel free to reach out to me, but I just think that, look at this wedding dress, and I wanted to show one of the patterns here that is all about the veil, and you'll see what we'll talk about is you're getting your schematic, you're getting your measurements, and then you're getting your chart. So that's really important to know, that one of the things that is critical is that you are understanding how to read charts. You know, with patterns that you do in the US, it's written out for you, but this is really looking at schematics. And what's interesting is, of course, the cover is in the back, and then you don't have to open the magazine because usually this is wrapped. This will give you everything that's in the book, which, again, amazing. And I really wanted to kind of share this. This is interesting because if you, this is the bookstore name here. And if you email them, they will actually help you subscribe, and that can get sent directly to your house. So there's no need to book a trip to New York or go to San Francisco or find a little Japan within your neighborhood. But if you have it, it's a great little excursion. And if it's available to you, I encourage you to see if you can find these things in your own cities. I'll be choosing 3 winners. These are copies of 3 of my favorite books, and I would love to share them with viewers like yourselves so that you can get started knitting or crocheting. And I hope that you can share what you've done once you've received the books. So I look forward to seeing all the entrants. So before we get into this lovely drawing that I did for you, I just wanted to talk about the supplies, because I do think it's really important just to have basic supplies. I like to kind of see what the pattern's going to give me and kind of take it from there. So I always take a picture of it, and then I print it out and I put it into these folders. And then I highlight or I tape anything that is important. I also have a notebook that's in here with any notes to myself, my gauge. Sometimes I'll keep my gauge swatch and I'll just put it in here. This is a folder around Amsterdam for 50 cents. I like this color. I think it's really bright and happy and positive and makes me think of the sky. But you can get a folder at Target or Walmart and it'll suffice. I usually staple it or put a little piece in. I definitely make sure that I have a lifeline. I use this hemp cord sometimes, but I also have some little plastic lifelines. If you don't know what a lifeline is, I will do a video about it. I'm going to do a whole video about how I pack my yarn to travel. And we're going to give you a whole review of what my preparation process is, just so I can actually do projects. But this is just an example of something I use. Obviously the needles that you need, this little doohickey that I talked about earlier, stitch markers, extra of these that sometimes I actually use these as lifelines as well. A variety of scissors because I put them in my bag and then they disappear. And then sometimes if I'm working my desk or at home, I usually maybe put it in this little grouping just so that it's available to me when I need it. And I always have a crochet needle, mainly because this is actually an Afghan hook, but I actually have it so I can fix mistakes, and I always keep it around because I always make mistakes. And either I can work it out in the next row, but if I've got a drop stitch or something, I always keep this at the ready, and I can't recommend that more. All right, so now that we've seen the books, let's talk a little bit, and you've seen some of the patterns. Let's talk about what are the basic components that we're going to look at. So obviously, you've seen that anything can be done. You can crochet, you can knit, you can make socks, you can make bags, you can make skirts. And so the interesting part, which I talked about in my previous video, is that they took it upon themselves to make sure that everything followed a very similar premise in terms of what are the components of the actual pattern from a visualization standpoint. So you are looking at my sort of high-level intro schematic viewpoint so that you could take a look at it. What are the sort of common components? So let's just talk about basic pattern information. Pattern name's always going to be on the top, either the top left or the top across, if you could fit all the schematics on one page. Usually these patterns are multiple pages, so do not look at this and say this is a one-to-one. This is just giving you what the top level components are. And when I speak to that, what I'm really talking about is what you're going to see at the top of the page, such as this. So this will be everything that I'm referencing at the moment. So you'll always see a picture of the garment, and you'll always be like, oh, I really like that garment, so I'm going to go to wherever that garment is. I'm going to see all the top information, which we're going to talk about now, and I'm going to see the schematics. So with that said, you'll have the yarn requirements. Every one of these books, as I showed you when we went through the patterns themselves, will always have yarn information. It will always have technical considerations, so really interesting stuff. So that'll be on the top here. You can either substitute it for yarn you have. You don't have to buy the exact same yarn that's in the pattern, but if you wanted to do that, I'm going to talk about some sites that you can go to. Puppy's a big, and Rowan yarn is really big in Japan. So those are a couple of places that you can source from. So if you already have Rowan, it's kind of awesome because you can just kind of start going. The next bullets that you're going to see in every pattern, because it's always going to be the same, is you're going to have your needle sizes. And the most important thing I must impart, because this was my big sort of stage one fail, was you're going to go from Japanese to US. And so Clover Japan did a great thing and created this so that you could convert. I have a link in the description, so you'll have the ability to get this, because they're going to reference this needle size, and you would like to make sure that you have the comparable in your repertoire to make sure you're all prepped and ready to go. It's going to have finished measurements. That's also going to be in your visual schematic, so don't get too panicked if you can't read that. Like, it's all good. It's going to be in your chart. That's the beauty of these patterns, is that it's always in your chart. The other thing that you are going to see, which is kind of awesome as well, is you're going to get your gauge. You're going to get your row gauge, and you're going to get your stitch gauge. I think it is absolutely critical that you swatch, and if you're in one of these more complicated patterns, like the book that I originally showed you, like this, you kind of want to swatch and pattern, mainly because the construction details in the schematics are probably going to either tell you which chart you're stitching to the next chart, so you kind of want to make sure everything is working as you see it, or if you need to increase or decrease, this is your opportunity to have that information available to you so you can make the proper adjustments to your garment. There is a whole world of making adjustments in this world, and there's actually a book that I'm in the middle of deep diving on, so I can do a specific video so that we can take this to sort of a level 2. But for level 1, I would suggest that you do mainly like a basic sweater or something that is like front and back piece, or yoke sweater, and you're really kind of either working in the round or flat with a chart. That's going to just be, or a shawl, and that's going to be a great level of success for you. It gives you that ability to move on to the next types of patterns that we're going to work on. The next thing is a summary of construction. There's going to be a bullet point with a paragraph. I've always heard ignore it. I don't like ignoring things in patterns. It's just my way. I've taken liberty to do a little sub video for you, which hopefully is playing on the side, and if it's not, it will be playing as I speak over this. But basically what I do is that sometimes there's notes here that are kind of interesting for me as I'm preparing. I usually go into my Google Translate, I take a picture of it, it automatically goes from Japanese to English. I save it as text, and then I copy and paste that instruction, and then I may put it into a Word document or save it as a picture, and I integrate it into the other tools that I leverage when I use Japanese knitting. For the most part, when I'm working on something in one of these books, I like these books as just collector pieces, so I usually take a picture of the actual pattern themselves, And then I take these schematics so that I can go and I can make them bigger in the app. I'm going to take a visual of like a little subsection of both apps to show you how I've done it. But Knit Companion is a phenomenal app that's going to allow you to expand, add notes, write yourself where you are, add whatever you need. It even have I think it has like an abacus to it, which is wild. So ever you want to count your rows and what stitches or what repeats you're in, they've got all the tools of the trade there. There's another app called Knit. I actually employ both. I think there's benefits with one versus the other in terms of complicated patterns and how to use them. So I'll show some videos on that, and I'll just kind of give you a sense of how I utilize them. But normally I take a picture, I load them into the app, I name the app, I add whatever other supportive materials I'm going to do, and then I work from the app like that. I also do a photocopy of these patterns for the main reason that sometimes I only have my phone and I do not have my iPad with me or whatever device I have, and I just want to work and I want to have it folded. I normally have this with me. I have highlighter tape. I have a notebook to write myself notes. So that's sort of the basic format of the top. It also give you the amount of stitches. So if you've got nuanced things that are happening here, you're understanding how to follow yourself while you're reading the chart. And that's extremely, extremely important. I think it's great for me because I constantly go back. There are some decreases and increases in here that I did not include because I didn't want to get too wild with how deep we go into this instruction. But it does have the instructions on how to decrease this. Normally this is done on the right hand side of wherever it is. It's going to tell you, and it's basically what row, how many stitches are you decreasing, and how many times are you decreasing it. So it's going to look like 3 numbers with dots in between them, and I don't want you to panic. It's literally what row are you starting to decrease, how many stitches are you decreasing, and then the third thing is how many times are you doing it. So if you see that, a bunch of like numbers just following down and you start to see a decrease, take a deep breath and be like, okay, that's what she was mentioning. And you'll have the front and back. The thing we're not seeing right here, which hopefully we will see in a visual, is I'm showing you a chart. The chart is what is your construction guide. And so that is the most important thing and the thing that you're going to be following. So for instance, this is giving you, this is the schematics. Voila, here is the chart. This is why I say take a picture of it and construct it. This is basically what you're going to be following to make this garment. And this is basically everything we talked about with front and back and visuals and measurements, and this is the repeat. And basically once you understand all that, you are completely equipped to actually start even doing the pattern that I showed you there. The other thing to kind of mention is that, and I'm sorry about that, you're going to be reading a chart. So let's talk about charts at a super high level. They're going to be numbered 1 to how many ever rows you start from the bottom up. The pattern will tell you whether you're knitting in the round or you're knitting flat based on the schematic. So the schematic is telling you you're knitting flat, just so that we're aware. And basically you're starting from right to left, then you're going backwards from left to right for row 2. That's why I mentioned the highlighting tape. So if you are printing that chart out, you want to get to that highlighter tape so you know where you are. You're writing yourself grid notes. You are also doing on the way back the reverse stitch. The book will tell you what the reverse stitches are, so do not be alarmed if you happen to have a chart and all of a sudden you need to do something in the reverse, because basically what it's going to tell you is what exactly you need to be doing, and it will set. And for the most part, it's probably like a knit row and then you're purling. Like it'll look at knit stitches and you're purling. And even if there's a bunch of complicated like design here, I have not yet encountered something where I have to do the stitch in reverse. So I haven't knitted everything, so I can't say that it does not happen but I would say 99% of the time you're just looking at knit and purls or some yarn overs, and you're just and you'll basically have a legend that happens, that occurs somewhere on the page on the bottom right of that chart to tell you this is what you're going to be doing on the reverse. So again, they're making it as clean and as clear as possible. And if you had to do something crazy, they're probably going to give you the instructions on exactly how to do it in a visual way, just so that you're always getting a technique element, which is what you see here, so that you're not wondering what on earth you're going to be doing. So that's the one thing. It's like almost having an instruction manual and a pattern book all in one. So again, don't be shy. Go to the store. Look at these things. Look, examine, choose a project and go for it. I will tell you that you will not be disappointed. It's one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. And again, this is a very clever way to just make sure you're converting. So I just wanted to do an honorable mention again on this. Very important is to make sure that the needle sizes. And again, if you're swapping out the yarn requirements, if you're going to go for a different yarn type, there's plenty of sites that help you do similar substitutions. Again, if you swatch and everything's looking good and you feel like it's going to fit and everything's going to get constructed the right way, go for it. I mean, when I did my shawl, I actually totally changed what I was doing, and I picked a totally different yarn, and I was actually really pleased that I did that. And I just kind of swatched and patterned, and I was like, all right, I like the way this looks, and I kind of went for it. So let's talk a little bit more. It will tell you that it's front and back. The schematic's also going to tell you repeat the needle size. So if you can't figure this out up here, it's always going to be in here. You're also going to get the, here's your sort of the depth of your neckline, your shoulder length. So if you need to add or remove a stitch, that's on you. Again, this is the idea of the customization. And for some of you who are these amazing expert knitters that I am in awe of, you're already looking at this like doing your thing and doing your math and rocking it out. Here it's telling you what the length of each piece is, and it's just giving you that extra pieces of information. So this is also the blueprint to help you length. So if you have a super long torso and you need to make this another 4 inches, you can just add rows as your gauge tells you. And maybe if you have a complicated pattern, maybe you're adding some ribbing here. If you notice it in the pattern, you've got like a repeat of just stocking knit, maybe you're adding a little more of that, whatever it is that you need to do to make this work for you. So with that, we'll talk a little bit more in the next video about how do we modify a little bit of this. I've got to go through that book because I really want to kind of go in depth and kind of nerd out a little bit more about how do we do a little bit more modification. I would say for those of us that are starting out, this is like baseline, and I really would love to hear what you all are knitting, what books you found. I will add the link to Kuna Kuna, and hopefully you feel empowered to be on your way to doing what it is that, and embarking on this sort of new journey of your knitting life. And I hope that we can talk so much more about so many other subjects. There's so much about this particular world that is yet to be discussed and uncovered. I'd love to talk more about the different fiber stores and sites and the different designers, just as resources for you. But I really wanted this video to talk a lot about what this is all about. And again, I couldn't do this without all the support from everybody, and thank you.